The system informed me that if I could raise my master's affection for me to 50, I would be able to return to my original world. To increase her affection quickly, I exhausted every possible method to treat her with absolute devotion. Year after year, however, my master's affection for me remained stubbornly at zero. This time, I even went as far as to extract my own golden core and gift it to the junior disciple she cherishes the most. Yet, her affection for me did not increase. In fact, it plummeted further. In my dying moments, following the system's suggestion, I decided to change my target, but the prerequisite for shifting my goal is that my current body must perish. And so I began my path toward death. I gazed down at my own dantian. Blood was still seeping out incessantly, and within moments, the clothes around me were soaked in a deep crimson red. It was a truly harrowing sight. I believed that at this rate it would not be long before I could finally fulfill my wish and die. This was the first time I felt satisfied with my master's actions, yet I felt the blood was not flowing fast enough. Thus, I instructed the system to disable my pain receptors, and I ruthlessly pressed into the wound, causing the blood to flow faster and more violently. Only when my consciousness began to blur did I rest easy, lying down to quietly await the arrival of death. Elsewhere, in the chambers of my master Bai Luoyan, she sat by the bedside, listening to Gu Yang speak. She was never a woman of many words or a gentle temperament, but when facing Gu Yang, the disciple she cherished most, she was always exceptionally lenient. Normally, she would rarely respond to anyone, but when Gu Yang shared his thoughts, she would gently acknowledge him. Yet today, something felt unusual. Master, is something the matter? After failing to receive a prompt reply once more, Gu Yang finally could not help but ask. Bai Luoyan, who had been slightly absent-minded, was pulled back to reality by this call. Upon realizing she had lost her focus, she furrowed her brows, feeling a flicker of annoyance in her heart. She was not annoyed at her lack of focus, but rather that the source of her distraction was me. She could not fathom what was happening. Ever since she departed from that room, her mind had involuntarily wandered back to the moment before she left, remembering how I had gripped her hand in desperation, which left her feeling deeply unsettled. Gu Yang, since you have recovered, you should rest well here. Your senior brother has some matters to attend to. I shall go and check on him. As she spoke, Bai Luoyan prepared to stand, deciding that since she had remembered me, she might as well pay a visit. Master, master. Two voices called out in succession to stop her. One was Gu Yang's, and the other belonged to the eldest disciple of Bai Luoyan standing nearby. She was Mu Shue, the senior sister of the Quan Wanfa sect. Mu Shu stepped forward and bowed in salute. The junior disciple has just regained consciousness. Having suffered both injuries and great shock, I fear he is not yet fully recovered. He is quite clingy, so you should remain here to keep him company. As for the fifth junior brother, you need not worry. I have not yet paid him a visit. If you wish to check on him, allow me to go in your stead. Bai Luoyan paused mid-motion, glancing at Gu Yang and hesitated for a moment. Master. Gu Yang wore an expression of expectation, his voice tinged with a hint of grievance. His master was usually cold and distant. It was rare for her to show such gentleness. Having just awakened from a grave injury, he naturally wanted her to stay a while longer, even if only for a brief moment. Bai Luoyan had always favored her youngest disciple, and seeing him like this, she could not bear to refuse, ultimately nodding in agreement. Mu Shue bowed and took her leave. After exiting the main hall, Mu Shue did not immediately head toward the side chamber to visit me, but first went to pay a visit to Shen Xing, the peak master of the medicine peak, to inquire in detail about Gu Yang's condition, and only then, with great reluctance, did she walk toward the side chamber where I resided. The reason she offered to visit me was merely because she could not bear to see Gu Yang, could not bear to see the junior disciple so aggrieved and sorrowful. In the side chamber, I felt my body growing colder, my consciousness gradually slipping away. As my mind drifted in a haze, I let out a sigh of relief, and a smile involuntarily tugged at the corners of my lips. At last, I was about to die, and finally I would no longer have to play the sycophant to Bai Luoyan. It is freezing, a bone-piercing cold. Even though the system has locked away my sense of pain, the body remains in a wretched state. It is an unbearable discomfort, akin to the aftermath of a grievous wound, where the body's innate resistance no longer holds any effect, where even lifting a hand is beyond my strength, leaving me with a sense of utter soul-crushing fatigue. Is changing bodies truly this agonizing? Before even opening my eyes, I reflexively attempted to circulate the spiritual energy within me. This is wrong, it should be demonic energy. I am Mo Jin now, but what kind of body have you given me, system? A few seconds later, I summoned the system within my mind. Why do I not possess even a shred of demonic energy? My dantian feels as though it has been pierced, with my strength continuously leaking away. The system remained silent for a long while before responding, sounding deeply troubled. Open your eyes and see for yourself. I hesitated for a moment, but immediately realized something was amiss. I snapped my eyes open, my entire body struck by a sense of disbelief. The small, rudimentary bamboo hut remained unchanged, with the few familiar items still in their exact original positions. Looking out through the half-closed window, I saw exactly what I expected, a landscape of endless, pristine white snow. This was clearly my residence within the Wanfa sect, the very place that Bai Luoyan, despising the sight of me, had specifically designated as the most desolate spot, far removed from the main hall. I possessed internal spiritual energy to protect my body, so I did not fear the cold. I had never concerned myself with this icy terrain, but because I had been so preoccupied with cultivation, I had neglected to furnish the small dwelling, which had left me vulnerable to the biting frost, forcing me to endure the full bitterness of the cold. As for my body, it was still the same one that had been excavated of its golden core. I hurriedly commanded the system to lock away all negative sensory input. What on earth was happening here? Only when my body no longer felt the cold did I regain my composure to inquire. Was Aunt supposed to be dead? Why am I still standing here, alive and well? But before the system could respond, a voice interrupted me. Senior brother, you are awake? I froze. I looked up to see a young disciple in outer sect robes standing at the door peering inside, and it was only then that I confirmed my eyes had not deceived me. This desolate bamboo hut, which usually saw no soul throughout the year, truly had an outsider present, and he was amazed that I had awakened. I actually thought you were about to perish. The young disciple, receiving no reply, was not offended in the slightest, but instead muttered to himself, when Senior Sister Mushue brought you back, you were already on the verge of death. It is fortunate that Senior Sister Mushue was there. Your survival is entirely thanks to her. At this point, there was nothing I did not understand. Just what exactly is wrong with this Mushue? She usually disparages me so relentlessly. I lay helplessly on the bed, staring up at my young disciple with a sneer that betrayed both my exhaustion and my seething resentment. I truly thank her for everything. He could not help but feel that there was something peculiar about that statement. Shortly after, the young disciple departed to seek out Mushue. Inside the bamboo hut, only one person and one system remained. By the time Mushue received the news and rushed over, my silhouette was nowhere to be found. This stirred a profound sense of unease in her heart as the scene from that day resurfaced in her mind, the moment she had walked into the humble dwelling within the side hall. Back then I lacked my usual arrogance, and I bore none of the tenderness I reserved solely for Bai Luoyan. There was only my broken body drenched in blood and lying motionless, left entirely alone on the bed without a soul to attend to me, as if I had been forsaken by the entire world, a sight that would move even the most hardened heart. What left the deepest impression on her was the faint smile at the corners of my lips, as if I had finally relinquished all worldly attachments. It was a smile of contentment, as though I had finally been granted release. At that moment, a vague premonition took hold. I was on the verge of departing from them forever. Initially, she had paid it little mind, for I was not someone she truly cared for. It had merely been a flicker of subtle compassion, prompting her to bring me back, order attendants from Medicine Peak to examine me, and assign a young disciple to look after me, after which she never visited again. But in the days that followed, she found herself haunted by that image, and her contemplation grew ever deeper. Only after hearing the news brought by the young disciple did that lingering sense of dread dissipate somewhat. Yet at this very moment, discovering that I had vanished upon her arrival, that feeling surged within her once more, even more violently than before. In an instant, Mushue was gripped by panic, frantically searching the surroundings for any trace of me. After a long and fruitless search, she suddenly realized she could utilize her divine sense. The moment she expanded her consciousness, she witnessed a sight that made her heart tighten in terror. Upon the snow-white cliff, I stood facing the abyss, my expression utterly indifferent. The frigid winds howled, tearing across my frail, thin frame, yet I seemed entirely unfazed. I allowed the biting gale to ravage my ruined body. A moment later, I lifted my foot, preparing to step off the precipice. Host, what are you doing? The system cried out in alarm. My movements froze. I began to harbor doubts about the intelligence of this suicide system, as it seemed unable to comprehend the situation. Host, you will not be able to perish by doing that. For some reason, the system felt a twinge of guilt, its voice growing noticeably weaker, because there had once been a host who deeply detested their missions, refusing to cooperate in every possible way and even attempting suicide to break free from the shackles of their task, which forced the system to halt and reset the host's physical form and identity. This ruined the predetermined outcome, all to prevent such an event from occurring again. From that point onward, all systems were equipped with a safeguard, a protection program designed to prevent the host from self-destruction. This protection program even included a punitive mechanism. If the mechanism were triggered, for example, the host would endure the agony of being dismembered, the suffering of being torn apart by 5 horses. This was the reason it had tried to stop me when it saw me intending to slit my throat earlier. As it continued, the system felt the heavy, oppressive atmosphere radiating from me. Its voice grew quieter and quieter until it finally fell silent. After a long period of silence, I quietly withdrew the foot I had extended over the cliff's edge. This is problematic. The body must truly die for me to detach from it. Then tell me, what am I supposed to do? After another long silence, I took a deep breath, and with a faint, enigmatic smile, I questioned the system. The system knew the answer to this. Suicide is prohibited, but there are many other ways to die. As long as it is not self-inflicted, the conditions for detaching from the body will be met. The system spoke as if claiming credit. Is that so? I fell into deep thought, my gaze drifting back toward the cliff. My body leaned forward slightly, a look of regret appearing on my face. Lu Chenzhou, don't! An anxious voice reached me from not far behind. Before I could even react, my body was pulled back, tucked into a warm embrace, and dragged away from the precipice. But the moment I was released, a roar filled with fear, yet laced with indignation, followed immediately. What are you doing? Do you no longer wish to live? Are you seeking death? If you want to die, do not die here. You will soil the grounds of the Wanfa sect. The sudden succession of events left me unable to react in time. Once I realized what had transpired, I was left utterly speechless. Who else but Mu Shu, the person who had ruined my plan for suicide, could have pulled me away from the edge of the cliff? Why is it you again? I asked with clear irritation. Was it not enough for this person to ruin my plans once already? Does she truly intend to ruin them a second time? Mushue was stunned by my question. The heart she had just calmed suddenly constricted in an inexplicable way. It was clear she had misunderstood my intentions, assuming I cared that it was her who arrived rather than the person I had been waiting for. Do you think I actually wanted to come? The tone of Mushue's voice held a trace of inexplicable bitterness. If it were not for the sake of the golden core you surrendered to Gu Yang, I would never have bothered to visit you. Who exactly were you hoping would come? Is it Master? Let me tell you something. Do not even dream of it. Gu Yang has just awakened, and Master must surely be by his side to watch over him. Master will not come to visit you. Even if you were to die, she would not spare you a single glance. The anger in Mushue's heart had nearly vented itself, and only then did she notice that I was staring blankly at her. My eyes vacant, my complexion so deathly pale that I looked like a mere shadow of myself, my entire body swaying in the cold wind as if I might collapse at any moment. Seeing me in such a devastated, shattered state, she realized what she had just said, and a sudden wave of guilt and regret surged within her. She should not have spoken those words. I was already in a state of profound grief, even harboring the desire to seek death. There was no need for her to utter such words, effectively driving a blade into my heart. She opened her mouth, intending to say something to salvage the situation, yet she knew not how to begin. In truth, Mushua had misunderstood entirely. My pallor was caused solely by the biting cold, a rather unfortunate coincidence. As she spoke those words, a gust of cold wind blew past. Was it not only natural for my face to appear even paler? The reason my eyes remained vacant and fixed upon the ground was that I was lost in thought, contemplating the feasibility of a new method of demise. System, tell me, if I were to provoke her and she struck me with a palm, what would be the probability of my death? I asked the system within my mind. My own host is truly a man of cruel whims. The system cursed inwardly, observing Mushu, who was clearly flustered and felt a strange flicker of pity. At this moment, Mujue's attitude toward me was vastly different from before. If I were to perish now, and by Mujue's accidental hand at that. T.S.K. contemplating such a scene, the system shook its head incessantly, filled with a sense of commiseration. It silently lit a memorial candle for the other party before cheerfully answering my question. The probability of the host succeeding in that endeavor is a 100% mortality rate. My eyes and Senior sister, you harbor feelings for Gu Yang, do you not? There was not a shred of hesitation in my voice. I immediately looked up at Mu Shui, asking with keen interest. If there was ever one thing that could rattle the otherwise composed eldest senior sister of the Wanfa sect, it was undoubtedly anything concerning Gu Yang. Do not ask how I know this, for I have tested it before, and I am currently devising a way to reopen the topic. Mu Shui was caught completely off guard by the question, unable to react in time. I asked her if she truly favored Gu Yang. I told her that if it were true, I could assist her in securing him. If you only cooperate with me, tomorrow I shall use the guise of an apology to lure him to a desolate location and trick him into drinking tea laced with an aphrodisiac. Once his state is compromised, you shall appear to save him, and the two of you can consummate the union. From that day forth, he will be yours. How does that sound? I grew more animated as I spoke. My gaze was filled with anticipation as I looked at Musho, hoping she would be enraged enough to strike me down with a single palm strike. Everyone knows the eldest senior sister of the Wanfa sect is a paragon of integrity who cannot abide even the slightest impurity. Now that I have confessed such schemes to her face, claiming I intend to do these things to the man she secretly adores, she should certainly be consumed by fury, hating me enough to wish to end my life with one blow. I had already steeled myself to depart from this body. Yet I wondered if perhaps she was simply terrified by my words and this treacherous plan of mine. Mushua remained silent for a long time, merely staring at me in a daze. Why would you wish to harm him in such a manner? After a long interval, Mushua finally moved, yet she did not strike me. Instead, she looked at me with eyes filled not only with resentment, but also with bewilderment and suspicion, accompanied by a complex expression that suggested she was frustrated by my lack of character. She looked at me, yet she made no move to attack. System, has this person malfunctioned? Why is nothing proceeding according to my calculations? I questioned the system in my mind, but why was there no response? Mushu asked again, her demeanor suggesting she would not rest until she had an answer. I furrowed my brow, finding her persistence immensely irritating. Why must there be a reason for such things? But seeing her unrelenting resolve to get to the truth, she appeared as though she would not let the matter go without a satisfactory answer. I deliberated for a moment, weighing my options. After conjuring up a plausible answer, my confidence surged. Without a hint of hesitation, I replied, naturally it is because Master favors him. Everything leads back to Master. Mushua's heart constricted, and a surge of fury rose within her, far more intense than when she heard me speak of harming Gu Yang. You care for Master that deeply? Deeply enough to sacrifice your life for their sake? Deeply enough to descend into villainy for them? She ground her teeth, demanding an answer, finally pushed to the brink of rage. Of course, I continued, stoking the flames. Once Gu Yang belongs to you, he will be nothing more than a ruined man. By then, Master will surely lose all interest in him, and there will be no one left to stand between Master and me. It is a situation where we both emerge victorious. You obtain Gu Yang and I obtain Master. What do you say? Are you willing to cooperate? This is the only opportunity you have to claim him. If you do not agree, I shall have no choice but to seek a partner elsewhere. I am certain that in the vast world of cultivation with so many who adore Gu Yang, someone will surely accept my proposal. Master, it was always master. A wave of blinding rage surged into Mu Shui's mind. She could no longer distinguish whether her anger stemmed from my wretched suggestions or something deeper. Hearing my increasingly outrageous words, she could no longer suppress her fury and struck me with a palm, sending me flying, exactly as I had hoped. As I was flung aside and collapsed onto the ground, I was momentarily stunned. Why did things not unfold as I had calculated? If she were behaving as she had in the past, should she not have struck me down without a shred of mercy? Why did she merely push me away?
As she ca-
Mushui was already filled with regret. Seeing the figure collapsed on the ground, the area around my dantian turned a stark, vibrant crimson, a glaring blood-red patch. It reminded her of what the disciples of the Medicine Peak had once said, that I had lost my golden core and my spiritual energy had dissipated entirely, that I was now considered a cripple, whose wounds would heal with agonizing slowness, and that no amount of spiritual energy or medicinal elixirs could mend my broken body. Panic welled up in her heart and she rushed forward, desperate to pull me to my feet. Do not touch me, I recoiled reflexively, keeping my distance from her. I watched her with suspicion and caution. This person who had defied her own established nature, while the blood from my midsection bled further into my robes from the movement. System, has Mujue been possessed by another soul? I questioned the system within my mind. Forget it. It is better to continue feigning death, for experience has taught me that pretending to be dead is the safer path. Seeing me so vigilant and distant, Mushue felt immense frustration in her heart. She wanted to be firm, yet feared that the other party might suffer further injuries. After a long moment of hesitation, she resentfully withdrew her hand, and filled with suppressed rage, she turned and left. As she walked away, it seemed she recalled something, and she left behind a final warning: forget the words you just spoke. If you dare to act upon them, not only will you fail to win over your master, but you will only earn her further disdain. Having said this, she sullenly turned and departed. Watching the shadow of her retreating figure, I felt a twinge of disappointment. Is it truly this difficult to find one's end? Fortunately, I felt no chill, so I lay flat on my back in the snow. With the weather this frigid, perhaps I might finally succumb to the cold. Given my current state, even moving requires significant effort. Surely the system will not force me to do anything now? Having received an affirmative response from the system, I let go of all worries and remained motionless. I do not know if the bitter cold induced a stupor, but I quickly felt my mind beginning to dull. Gradually, my consciousness began to fade. In my haze, I sensed someone approaching at a steady pace. I tilted my head to look. It was a familiar silhouette, vaguely resembling Jing Shou. It seemed I would not be able to die after all. This was the final thought before my consciousness vanished entirely. After I fell into a coma, someone finally reached my side. Shen Zishang stood tall, looking down at me as I lay gasping for breath amidst the snow, her expression as indifferent as ever. She stared for a long while, and for the first time a trace of disdain flickered across that face that never changed. She then crouched down and swiftly carried me toward Yao Feng. After saving me, she stood by the bedside and stared at me for a long time, though this time her expression carried a hint of complexity. A long time passed before she eventually walked out. Peak Master, you say he is seeking his own death upon the heights? Upon hearing Shen Zishang's words, the elegant and aloof Bai Luoyan revealed a look of contempt. Are you joking with this venerable one? In this world, anyone may seek their death, but he is the only exception. This is something you should understand better than I. Shen Zixing could not offer a rebuttal. From the very first moment she laid eyes on me, she knew exactly how much I feared death. In order to preserve my life, there was nothing I wouldn't do. Yet that was only in the past. These past two instances, she clearly sensed that I was seeking death, whether it was deliberately allowing my wounds to fester or making no attempt to save myself amidst the heavy snowfall. There was no need to pay him any mind. It was merely a performance for her benefit. As if reading her thoughts, Bai Luoyan spoke up, as if wanting her to see the act for herself. This corrode is a tactic he has employed countless times before, she stated. It is only that every time his schemes have ended in failure. Shen Zixing raised an eyebrow. Is that so? She responded with a tone full of hidden meaning. If this senior sister appeared aloof and extraordinary in the eyes of others, in her eyes she was merely arrogant and conceited. Should one know what transpired during the days I spent at Medicine Peak before I knelt to acknowledge my master, one would likely abandon such notions. However, her purpose in coming today was simply to fulfill her duty as a physician and clarify the patient's condition. As for other matters, she was never one to meddle in affairs that did not concern her. Since senior sister has said as much, this junior sister understands. If senior sister has no further instructions, I shall take my leave. Seeing that her goal had been achieved, Shen Zixing did not intend to linger. She stood up and bowed in farewell. Bai Luoyan nodded silently from her high position, but as the figure was about to exit the room, her fingertips twitched and she spoke again, seemingly nonchalant. When he wakes, tell him to return to the lecture hall tomorrow morning. As a personal disciple of Bai Luoyan, his continued absence for several days is an utter disgrace. Shen Zixing's footsteps faltered. She recalled the day I was brought before her, the way I hung by a thread. The state of my wounds under her treatment and mine could be described as too wretched to behold. It took several days for me to regain consciousness, a sign that my condition was dire, Not to mention that I had agitated those wounds again recently and been afflicted by cold chi. This senior sister of mine was truly cold-hearted, yet she who detested the sight of me, who did not even wish to see this person upon the lecture platform, had personally demanded that I return. This was truly unexpected, while on the other side I was busy procuring the finest heart lotus of the snows in the cultivation world for myself. I hear that a box of those only appears once a century. I remember that the souffle at the restaurant below the Sex Mountain is the most exquisite. Go and purchase some for me. Furthermore, I no longer possess a golden core and cannot practice anedia. If I do not eat, I shall starve. The meals prepared by the sex cooks are merely makeshift. While you are at it, bring the 2 chefs from that restaurant back here as well. And I have no spirit stones either. Cover the expenses for now. When Peak Master Shen returns, you may go to her for reimbursement. Once you have heard me, go and see to it at once. Do not delay my meal and ensure you serve me well. Your paths to the future will be much easier to tread, will they not? After all, I am your future sect master's consort. Shen Zixing had just returned. Before she had even stepped into the main hall, she laid eyes upon me, the very person who had been on the verge of death and unconscious when she departed. I was nonchalantly lounging on the chair she usually occupied, crossing my legs and comfortably ordering the gathered disciples of the Medicine Peak to carry out various tasks. My posture was a complete embodiment of arrogance and overbearing power, while those below me wore expressions of silent suppressed fury, seemingly intimidated by the very title I claimed. They were truly frightened by the notion of me being the future sect master's consort. Shen Zixing's expression darkened slightly as she lifted her foot and stepped inside. A disciple spotted her arrival, and their expression instantly shifted from indignation to a desperate, gladdened relief. The vulnerability they had displayed moments ago vanished completely. They assumed a facade of immense confidence, perfect for a child who had been bullied and finally found their protector. Seeing their superior arrive, the disciples scrambled to come forward and lodge a complaint, but were halted by a single look from Shen Zixing. The disciples could only watch as she walked step by step into the main hall, standing firmly before the dais, staring at me with a blank expression as I continued to command others. That person is finished was the thought shared by every disciple present. In their hearts, they began to anticipate the outcome. They waited to witness the moment this person would be subdued. High above on the grand chair, I continued to issue commands while racking my brain, thinking of even more difficult requests to impose upon them, all while inwardly sighing, wondering when the patience of the Medicine Peak disciples had become so profound. When I first awoke and realized I was in fact still alive, I felt deeply uncomfortable and wished to vent the resentment building within me, creating trouble for these busybody disciples of the Medicine Peak, so I summoned them all here to put them through a truly arduous ordeal. I had gathered them all to give them a taste of true difficulty, seeing their faces flush with anger, as if they wanted nothing more than to kill me. I cast a glance at them and became even more excessive and outrageous, hoping that these disciples would actually take action and end my life, yet the result left me deeply disappointed. Regardless of how much chaos I caused, these fellow disciples who usually clamored for a fight, these senior and junior brothers and sisters, despite their faces being filled with rage, managed to restrain themselves and did not strike. To seek death is in truth an incredibly difficult task. I sighed once more in my heart. While I was lost in thought, I suddenly sensed a change in the atmosphere within the hall. The clamoring disciples of the Medicine Peak seemed to fall into complete silence. Sensing something amiss, I tilted my head to scan the crowd, and immediately spotted amidst the throng before the hall a breathtaking woman clad in robes as white as snow, her brows furrowed in icy coldness, eyes fixed upon me with a solemn expression. You who are destined to end my life have finally arrived. It seems I have failed yet again in my quest for death. I was cast out of Medicine Peak, and thrown along with me was a fox fur cloak as white as newly fallen snow. It was the very cloak that went missing years ago when I first joined the sect under Bai Luoyan, the one I realized was lost when I moved to the main peak. Back then, I had intended to inquire about its disappearance, only to discover it had been left behind at Medicine Peak. After this incident of abusing power at Medicine Peak, my reputation plummeted even further. Everyone mocked my title as the future consort of the sect master, claiming I was indulging in delusional fantasies and insisting that Bai Luoyan's agreement to become my Dao companion was merely a stalling tactic. I remained entirely unbothered by these rumors, offering no explanation, focusing my entire being solely on how to achieve my end. The following day, as the sky turned bright, I trudged slowly toward the extreme frozen region at the mountain's summit. The lecture hall for the main peak's disciples was situated there. Having departed late, I arrived exactly when expected, well behind schedule. My sudden arrival interrupted Luoyan Xianzun as she was delivering her teachings. The inner sect disciples were listening with rapt attention. The inner sect disciples and the direct disciples of each peak ceased their focus, turning in unison to look at me. Before them, amidst the vast expanse of ice and snow, I stood draped in that pristine white fox fur cloak, standing in silent solitude. Having just recovered from a severe illness, my complexion was somewhat pale, yet it lacked any sign of wretchedness. On the contrary, it carried an aura of fragile beauty. The disciples were stunned for a moment, and upon realizing their reactions, they immediately scorned themselves for harboring such thoughts. It must be admitted, I am truly exceptionally handsome. From the very first day I arrived at Wanfa sect, they had been aware of this, but because of my subsequent conduct, My blatant hostility toward junior brother Gu Yang, and the various misdeeds I had committed, coupled with the fact that I usually wore a this caused everyone to simply ignore the matter. Why has he come here? A disciple asked, what else could he be doing? He is here to seek out immortal venerable Luoyan, is he not? Apart from that, what else could he possibly be doing? That man, he is immortal venerable Luoyan's shadow. Wherever she goes, he follows. Only yesterday that man was flaunting his title as the Sectmaster's future husband, and as the immortal venerable's cultivation partner, while causing a massive scene at the Medicine Peak. Not to mention that today, immortal venerable Luoyan will be holding a lecture here. This news has been spreading throughout the Wanfa sect since yesterday. One must realize that immortal venerable Luoyan usually imparts her teachings only to her personal disciples. Aside from him, all of the immortal venerable's other personal disciples have received her guidance. An occasion like today, where a lecture is held for the entire day, is a rare occurrence. We would brave any injury just to attend. It is no wonder he is here. It would be stranger if he had not shown up. The senior brothers and sisters replied, their voices dripping with sarcasm and disdain, all while wearing expressions of contempt, pointedly ignoring the gazes constantly flickering toward them. I lazily raised my eyes, scanned the crowd once, shrugged and muttered, I never intended to come in the first place. There is not a single person here who welcomes my presence. In the past, whenever I appeared, the atmosphere, once warm and lively, would invariably fall into a strange and unsettling silence. The expressions of those present would also grow unsightly. One by one, they began to show their hostility toward me. In order to see Bai Luoyan, I had never missed a single occasion, even though I knew full well that everyone loathed me and did not wish to lay eyes upon me. Now that I have abandoned the pursuit of Bai Luoyan, I naturally have no desire to be here. Yet who is to say I cannot find another way to seek death? I shall stay and see. Perhaps if I am lucky, I might even die here today. Thinking this, I resolutely ignored all the hostile glares, did not offer the customary salute to Bai Luoyan as I usually would, and simply walked toward an empty seat amidst the crowd. Halt! A deep cold shout echoed from the high platform. The disciples, who had just been whispering, fell silent, each one sitting bolt upright. Although the reprimand was not directed at them, my steps faltered. I stood still, turned around, and looked toward Bai Luoyan with an expression of feigned confusion. It has been but a few days, Lu Chenzhou, yet you grow increasingly unrestrained. Bai Luoyan's expression darkened, her cold, frigid words laden with oppressive pressure. For reasons unknown, seeing me in this state, so starkly different from how I once appeared before her, in which her eyes were always filled with trust and dependence, now held not even a flicker of affection. A sense of irritation rose within her heart, particularly because the snow-white robe I wore was a sight she found utterly intolerable. She had seen this very robe once before in the possession of Shen Zishang. As these thoughts surfaced, the pressure she exerted grew even more suffocating, and her words became increasingly cold and heartless. Before the gathering, she barked harshly. Upon seeing your elder, you fail to offer a proper salute. Truly, you are a child beyond instruction. Rotten wood cannot be carved. The pressure of a tribulation transcendence expert surged forth. How could the disciples present hope to withstand it? How could the disciples present hope to withstand it? Their faces turned deathly pale, their very blood boiling in turmoil. To make matters worse, having just lost my golden core, I was currently nothing more than an ordinary mortal. I was forced directly to my knees, one hand trembling against the ground to keep from collapsing entirely. Blood began to trickle from the corner of my mouth. System. This time we truly did not come here in vain, I exclaimed inwardly to the system with excitement. The voice replied with a tone of comfort. Had I known Bai Luoyan was this reasonable, I would have urged you to find her sooner. The system was equally pleased and expectant. Congratulations, host. As long as Bai Luoyan increases the intensity of her pressure, we shall be able to depart from this vessel immediately. Understood, I replied to the system, while silently hoping for Bai Luoyan to exert herself further and crush me to death with her aura. Yet in the very next instant, that pressure capable of toppling mountains and draining seas receded as quickly as a retreating tide. Perplexed, I lifted my head to look at her on the throne, only to meet the dark, brooding gaze of Bai Luoyan, eyes like pools of water carrying a hidden, simmering rage. That look in her eyes was as if I had committed some heinous, unforgivable crime. I glanced around in confusion, my eyes meeting the sight of the disciples, their faces drained of color. With the exception of Moose Shoes and a few other core disciples, everyone else had been significantly affected. At this point, I understood. She blamed me for implicating the others present, and she had ceased her assault only because of the onlookers. With that realization, I looked back at Bai Luoyan, facing her fury. The disciple has committed such a grave error. Does Master intend to punish me? My tone could not help but betray a hint of frailty, yet my voice was brimming with anticipation. I had struggled to endure only because of the other disciples present, but based on past experience, I was on the verge of death. Bai Luoyan was left momentarily stunned by the question. Originally, she had merely been dissatisfied with my insolent behavior today. She only wanted to teach me a minor lesson, not inflict any real injury upon me. Her strike had been entirely instinctive. She had forgotten that at this moment my golden core was gone. She did not expect me to be so stubborn. Blood was already trickling from the corner of my mouth, yet I still insisted on defying her. This only served to further incite her anger. And yet, thinking she intended to punish me, I felt a strange sense of resentment welling up within. Please punish your disciple, I said, as if it were a matter of course. Judging by past experiences, this was typically the moment for my master to mete out a penalty. Was she silent because she had yet to decide upon the nature of the punishment? I nodded with a look of feigned gravity, stating that since the disciple had committed such a grave error, causing master to utter that the child is difficult to teach and rotten wood cannot be carved, I should be punished severely. Perhaps, as in the past, you could send me to the punishment platform to receive 30 lashes. 30 lashes. 30 lashes imbued with spiritual energy. If they were to strike my body now, the outcome would undoubtedly be fatal. However, seeing Bai Luoyan's expression darken, clearly indicating her dissatisfaction, I sighed with slight disappointment. Are you not satisfied? If master is displeased, you could instead punish me by sending me to the rear mountain to tend to the spirit beasts. They are called spirit beasts, but in reality they are man-eating ferocious beasts. Whenever I committed a transgression in the past, I was frequently sent there. Back then, with my golden core cultivation, I would emerge covered in wounds, though I would always survive. If the rear mountain were not protected by a barrier, and if I were not currently unable to open the grand formation of the Wanfa sect, nor lacking anyone close to me, I would have long since thrown myself into the rear mountain to be devoured by the beasts. Has Lu Chenshu lost his mind? Before Bai Luoyan could respond, the disciples below, shocked by my words, began to murmur among themselves, completely ignoring the gravity of the situation. This is the first time I have ever seen someone beg to be punished. Is there something wrong with his head? I stood to the side, silently listening to the surrounding gossip. Mushu, however, was filled with complex emotions. Others might not know the truth, but she knew it all too well. I had not lost my mind. I merely wanted my master's gaze to linger upon me for a moment longer. For the sake of possessing my master, this man did not hesitate to yield his own life, all to eradicate the obstacles standing between him and her. Thinking back to the plan I had once discussed with her, she thought to herself that during this time, she must keep a close eye on me, guarding against the possibility that I might truly commit a grave error and harm the junior martial brother. With this thought in mind, she could not help but glance at me and Bai Luoyan. Seeing that I was still diligently proposing methods of punishment to our master, she could not suppress a sense of groundless anxiety. If master were to truly agree, my current physical state would be unable to withstand it in the slightest. Seeing Bai Luoyan's expression darken further with each of my words, she stood up subconsciously to plead on my behalf. Junior brother Lu Chenzhou did not intend to be disrespectful or act out of turn. Because he lost his golden core and possesses no spiritual power, the wounds upon his body heal at a glacial pace. He only regained consciousness yesterday, and his body remains incredibly weak, so for him to even arrive today was an immense struggle. Therefore, his tardiness and lack of decorum are understandable and should be forgiven. Master, I beg you to spare him this once. My heart immediately sounded the alarm. When Mu Shui stepped forward, I already had a grim premonition, but I did not expect it to manifest so swiftly. Fearing that Bai Luoyan might truly be swayed by Mu Shui's meddling, I hastily interrupted her. Senior sister, you are not me. How could you possibly know that my actions were not intentional? I did not intend to create such a scene, but I immediately began to argue with her. What of my actions yesterday? Yesterday I engaged in a bout with you. Although it was not a physical trial, a war of words is still a form of competition. I was truly on the verge of being incensed to death by Mu Shui. What exactly is wrong with this person? She interrupts my plans for death-seeking and escape time and time again. Would it not be better if she simply ignored me like before, or perhaps delivered one final killing blow? The two of us argued openly right in front of Bai Luoyan and the gathered disciples. The disciples present were all stunned. And what stunned them was not the argument itself, but the fact that the senior sister who usually loathed me was now pleading for my sake, all while I refused to accept her favor and instead appeared concerned for the other party. Enough. Having heard enough of our squabbling, Bai Luoyan finally spoke, her expression having turned ghastly. Is this how I have taught you to behave? The disciple Mushu immediately knelt to acknowledge her fault, asking to be punished as the master saw fit. But at these words, Bai Luoyan, who should have been placated by Mushui's apology, found her expression turning even more unsightly. She glared at me with eyes as dark as ink, harboring an immeasurable and dangerous intent. From the moment she saw me today, it was as if I were intentionally provoking her, having even demanded that she personally punish me moments ago. Why? Memories of how I had insisted on being punished surfaced in her mind, and her heart felt heavy, as if crushed by a boulder. She recalled that Shen Zixing, who had always despised me, had acted uncharacteristically by seeking her out yesterday. Judging by the current situation, Mushui's previous behavior was also one of contempt toward me, and suddenly she seemed to realize something. I was acting out of resentment toward her. She nurtured the anger she failed to restrain that day, blending resentment with a display of feigned suffering, a strategy that had proven successful with Shen Zihong and Mu Shui. Did she truly believe I was as easily deceived as Shen Zihong and Mu Shui? Once the lecture concludes, report to the discipline hall to receive your punishment. Bai Luoyan, convinced she had grasped my petty intentions, issued her verdict immediately. Mu Shui offered no objections, though she cast a few worried glances in my direction. As for Lu Chenzhou, he remained silent. Having delivered the sentence to Mu Shui, Bai Luoyan turned her gaze toward me. Upon hearing my name called, I felt a surge of anticipation. I thought to myself, even Mu Shui was ordered to receive punishment at the discipline hall. Given how much Bai Luoyan detests me, her sentencing would surely be no less severe than Mu Shui's. Perhaps this time I would finally find my chance to meet my end and escape this existence. As Mushui mentioned, you are still nursing injuries, Bai Luoyan stated. I shall not punish you severely for now. Once your wounds have healed, I will decide how to deal with you further. As Bai Luoyan spoke, I wondered, am I suffering from auditory hallucinations? There is truly no need to show mercy to a disciple, I managed to say, struggling to keep my tone neutral. That is final. With that closing decree, Bai Luoyan observed my reaction. Believing she had correctly deciphered my thoughts, she retracted her gaze with a sense of indifference. She then added, while I am granting you a reprieve for now, major offenses may be forgiven, but minor ones cannot be overlooked. You were late today, and that is a fact. Such indulgence cannot go unpunished. Stand to the side until the lecture concludes. Having said this, she didn't bother sparing me another glance. I sighed. Things had returned to their expected trajectory. I thought that was the end of it, but before even half an incense stick of time had passed, another latecomer arrived. I was distracted by play and arrived late. It was Gu Yang's fault. Master, please punish Gu Yang. Wang knelt on one knee, making his request. The crowd murmured and looked toward Bai Luoyan, who sat upon her high throne, eager to see how she would punish him after having dealt with me in such a manner. Everyone present felt a sense of unease, fearing Gu Yang would be subjected to the same harsh discipline. I, however, assumed the role of a spectator, curious to see how the one hailed by the entire cultivation world as the most righteous and impartial figure, the sect master of the Wanfa sect, would openly favor and protect her favorite in front of all the disciples. Indeed, it was blatant protection. I never believed Bai Luoyan would truly punish Gu Yang for such a trivial matter. Reality proved the disciples' concerns misplaced and my own assumptions equally flawed. Bai Luoyan merely cast a light glance at Gu Yang and spoke as if nothing out of the ordinary had occurred. Take your seat. Your body has only just recovered. You should not overexert yourself. Such transparent favoritism, offered without even a veil of pretense. What need was there for subtlety? The disciples present felt relieved, yet they couldn't help but look toward me with eyes filled with pity, Musho included. She looked at me, seemingly about to speak, as if she wished to tell me something, but in the end, she remained silent. By this moment, she seemed to understand, at least in part, why I harbored such deep resentment toward Gu Yang. Gu Yang stood up cheerfully and took his seat. Bai Luoyan, this dog is truly going too far. Are those surrounding us content to simply stand by and watch such an injustice? Witnessing this scene, the system could no longer contain itself and began to rail against it in frustration. Calm down, I responded with a faint smile in the confines of my mind. System, isn't this just a standard procedure? There is no reason for anger, one simply needs to grow accustomed to it. Although those present could not hear the dialogue between the system and me, hearing that faint, subtle laugh of mine, for some inexplicable reason, their bodies stiffened involuntarily. Every person there felt a sense of unease, their faces flushing hot, not daring to meet my gaze any longer. This should have been a matter they were long accustomed to. Yet today, for reasons unknown, their hearts were weighed down by a sense of guilt, and my faint laughter felt piercingly discordant to their ears. You find it discordant, and what of her? Bai Luoyan, contrary to her usual aloof and noble demeanor, knitted her brows tightly. The atmosphere in the hall grew strange for a moment. By the time Gu Yang took his place, Bai Luoyan began once more. The rare lecture on cultivation practice slowly gained momentum, yet this time no one was as focused as they had been before. While listening, they would unconsciously cast glances in my direction. Among them, Mouche was even worse, stealing a look at me almost every few seconds. As for me, I remained oblivious to this bizarre atmosphere. At that moment, I was conversing with the system in my mind. System, I truly feel a bit dizzy. Upon hearing this, the system immediately began to scan my physical condition. According to the system's diagnostic, since losing the golden core, the host lacks spiritual energy, and having gone without food or drink for several days, combined with the excessive blood loss from before and the exertion of climbing such a high mountain today, the environment here on the mountain is colder than at the base, and without spiritual energy to repel it, the cold energy has directly invaded the host body. Furthermore, being subjected to a standing punishment without the ability to, after several successive accumulations of pressure, my physical body naturally could no longer withstand the strain. The reason you do not feel this discomfort is because the negative status suppression function has been activated. Thus, feeling dizzy is only to be expected. Furthermore, within a few seconds, you will lose consciousness right where you stand. What else can I even say? Under the system's ultimatum, my vision immediately turned dark, my body swayed as if about to collapse, and my consciousness began to fade. I only hope that when I fall, I do not land face first. Then I knew nothing more. Mushue was the first to react. Her attention had, after all, been focused on me from time to time. As my complexion grew increasingly pale, she noticed my abnormality the moment I began to waver. In the brief instant before anyone else could react to my collapse, she rushed forward to catch me. This sudden turn of events caused everyone present to cease what they were doing. They looked toward us in succession, and Bai Luoyan, in particular, stood up instinctively. Seeing Jing Mushuo holding me tightly in her arms, the expression on her face turned colder than before. For some unknown reason, she found this scene rather eyesore. Sensing her gaze, Mushuo looked up and met her eyes. Recalling similar moments from the past, Bai Luoyan would certainly have paid no mind, choosing instead to indifferently let the person fall to the ground, and perhaps even becoming agitated, because the sound of the body hitting the floor disturbed her peace. Assuming she would act as she always did, perhaps still angry that the commotion had interrupted her, and would demand she put me down and leave me be, Mu Shui tightened her grip subconsciously. Forgive me, master, for causing you a disturbance. After a moment of hesitation and deliberation, Mu Shui ultimately knelt on one knee while cradling me. Her voice rang out with firm resolve, though Lu Chenchu's current condition was dire. She could not simply stand by, so she begged for permission to act against convention this once. Once I was properly settled, she would return to accept her punishment. Regardless of how the master might choose to discipline her in the days to follow, she would accept it all without a single word of complaint. But to ask her to abandon me now, that she absolutely could not do. Having spoken, she prepared to carry me away. Stop, Bai Luoyan's cold voice echoed from behind, but at the mere sound of it, Mu Shui knew that her master was undoubtedly furious. Under normal circumstances, she would have immediately knelt to beg for forgiveness. Yet at this moment, she merely looked at the person in her arms and prepared to press onward. But in the next second, she froze. A figure had appeared directly in her path. Mu Shui's entire body tensed and her grip on the person in her arms tightened instinctively. Lu Chenzhou is truly on the brink of death. I beg you, remember that she is your disciple and consider how long she has held you in her heart. Bai Luoyan impatiently cut Mu Shui off. She acknowledged that, as a master, she might have been somewhat strict with them, but she was certainly not heartless. With which eye did you see me intending to harm her, and with which eye did you see me ignoring her? Did I ever forbid her from caring for others? Refusing to offer further explanation, she reached out and grasped my wrist directly. Placing her index finger upon my pulse, she began to channel her spirit energy into my body. With her spirit energy shielding me from within, my injuries would no longer continue to worsen. Yet she had not expected my wrist to be so fragile and thin, to the point that she felt a sense of hollowness even as she held it. She found herself subconsciously wanting to tighten her grip, to feel that sensation once more. Realizing this strange turbulence within herself, a flicker of disgust crossed Bai Luoyan's eyes. Her brows furrowed slightly, and her expression betrayed clear displeasure, as she suppressed the peculiar thoughts stirring in the depths of her heart. She steadied her focus and began to dedicate herself to channeling energy into me. Master, please no. Mu Sui attempted to intervene, but it was already too late. The pain was so intense it jolted me into consciousness. Upon waking, I found myself cradled in Mu Shui's arms, while before us stood Bai Luoyan. To see the woman who only days ago would wipe her hands with a silk handkerchief after the slightest contact, now gripping my wrist so firmly, left me somewhat dazed. Before I could even begin to comprehend the situation, a surge of violent agony tore through every meridian in my body, feeling as though blades were being frantically carved into my flesh. The pain drained the very strength from my body, making it difficult even to cry out. My forehead was already damp with a fine layer of cold sweat. I tried to pull my hand away, but Bai Luoyan's grip only tightened. In the end, I could only bury myself deeper into Mu Shui's embrace as if seeking salvation. System, what is happening? This was a desperate plea, for I could no longer endure the torment. Has the system's pain concealment function not been activated yet? The system was also extremely anxious. The mechanical voice seemed tinged with urgency as it replied that it was indeed active, but the pain concealment function can only mask agony below level 10. However, this sensation of being torn asunder and having one's bones ground to dust, this level of pain has already reached level 15. The concealment function is unable to fully suppress it, although the host's meridians throughout the entire body have been shattered. Even though the meridians are completely ruptured and the spiritual veins have burst, the pain level has reached the point of one's body being ground to ash. Originally, I could have endured a fraction of it, but after hearing the system's explanation, I felt as though my entire being was collapsing. Even that small bit of endurance seemed to vanish entirely. Host, please hold on. This will be over soon. The system felt deep remorse but was helpless, offering only the consolation that according to its scans, the body's functions were failing and life force was draining away. Before long, the vitality of this vessel will vanish completely. Knowing I would soon escape this body, the physical agony seemed insignificant. It appeared that misfortune and a blessing were hand in hand. I no longer struggled. My body, cradled in Mu Shui's arms, only trembled slightly as a natural reflex to the pain. Though I had stopped struggling, the pain remained. It was truly excruciating, so intense that my consciousness began to blur. I started talking to myself in a delirious state. So the reason you didn't punish me earlier was that you felt my suggestion was too lenient? You wanted to do it yourself? I muttered my grievances in a low voice. You should have said so earlier. It's not like I would have refused. I even wanted to thank you. This way, I won't have to worry about how to die. Though it hurts a bit, not having to choose is quite a relief. Saying that, I struggled to lift my head from Mu Shui's embrace. With great difficulty, I looked toward Bai Luoyan and offered a faint, relieved smile. Master, you are truly a good person who helps me escape this shell. Though I must admit this method makes me want to curse you. After unconsciously uttering those words, the numbness finally set in and I succumbed to the darkness. Bai Luoyan's hand, which was gripping my pulse point, couldn't help but tremble. Only now, upon hearing my words, did she realize something was terribly wrong. Master, do you truly wish for her death? Mu Shui's voice, filled with grief and indignation, reached her ears. Bai Luoyan's spiritual energy stagnated, and the spiritual power binding Mu Shui's body began to wane. Mu Shui realized instantly that she had managed to break free from the containment technique in the shortest time possible. She scooped him up and retreated several paces, putting distance between herself and Bai Luoyan, paying no mind to whether her actions were considered proper or decorous. Right before Bai Luoyan's eyes, she checked his condition. His spiritual meridians and vital channels were completely shattered. Upon confirming this, Mushue's eyes could not help but redden. I am sorry, her voice was choked with emotion, laced with both self-reproach and intense resentment. If only she had acted a moment sooner to take him away, or if she had whisked him off the moment the master began to harass him upon his arrival, or if her own cultivation were higher, she might have forcibly broken the master's containment spell when the master was pumping spiritual energy into him, preventing the tragedy entirely. Then he would not have been injured to this extent, suffering in such agony that he woke only to lose consciousness again. Reflecting on the words he had spoken before collapsing, she felt a piercing ache in her heart. How could there be someone as foolish as him in this world, so infatuated that even as he stood on the precipice of death, he remained devoted to the one who sought his life? He even found solace in the thought that if he were to be punished by her, dying at the hands of the one he loved most was a joy. You fool, her voice was hoarse and helpless. Immediately after, she spoke as if to console him. Do not be afraid, I am taking you to Medicine Peak now, you will be fine. Where do you think you are taking him? Bai Luoyan finally snapped back to her senses, and without a second thought, she moved to intercept them. She still did not understand why her attempt to soothe him with a transfusion of spiritual energy had triggered such a violent reaction from Mushu, nor did she grasp why he had uttered those final words. She would not simply stand by and let her take him away, she needed to get to the bottom of this. Where am I taking him? In that instant, Mushu felt nothing but profound sorrow. For the first time, she looked directly into Bai Luoyan's eyes. For the first time, she met Bai Luoyan's gaze without backing down, her voice trembling with indignation and steel. Master, can you not see that he is in a critical state and is in dire need of a medicinal cultivator to save his life? You ask where I am taking him? Naturally, to Medicine Peak to find someone to save him. If you do not rescue him now, he will perish. He is at death's door. Bai Luoyan was slightly shaken. Ignoring her, Mushu prepared to leave immediately with him in her arms. It was at this moment that Bai Luoyan became difficult, and although Mushu had remained guarded after the previous incident, she was merely a cultivator at the early nascent soul stage. How could she possibly be a match for Bai Luoyan, a grandmaster on the verge of ascension? In the blink of an eye, the person in her arms was snatched away. Return him to me. Without a thought, Mushu lunged to reclaim him, but with a single palm strike, she was sent crashing to the ground by Bai Luoyan. A mouthful of blood spewed forth, yet she ignored it, her heart filled only with deep anxiety. Her master, Bai Luoyan, seeing this reaction, merely pressed her lips into a thin line. Although she had no intention of causing me harm, and despite not knowing why, after channeling her spiritual energy into me, my condition had only worsened, did Bai Luoyan really owe anyone an explanation for her actions? With that, she cast a cold, indifferent glance and, without a second thought, vanished into the air with the others. In her desperation, Mushu attempted to rise and pursue them, but the moment she stood, she coughed up another mouthful of blood and collapsed once more. Bai Luoyan's strike had been merciless. She showed no leniency, even toward her own direct disciple. Senior sister Mushu. Only after Bai Luoyan had departed, and after what had transpired, did Gu Yang, who stood dazed, and the surrounding disciples finally react, rushing forward to assist her. I am fine. Mushu struggled to her feet, clutching her chest as blood and chi surged within her. Once she had stabilized herself, she immediately sought to give chase. You are injured, do not stop me. Gu Yang attempted to intervene, but he was brusquely shoved aside. This was the first time Gu Yang had ever been snapped at by Mushu. He stood frozen in disbelief, and as the realization sank in, he felt a profound sense of grievance. Senior sister Mushu, how could you speak to me so harshly? Seeing their junior brother aggrieved, the surrounding disciples felt a surge of indignation and began to demand justice for Gu Yang. That's right, junior brother was only showing concern for you. If you won't accept his kindness, why must you lash out at him? In an instant, Mushu realized she had been venting her frustration on the wrong person. Gu Yang's innocence immediately filled her with remorse, but just as she was about to offer an apology, she was met with the collective criticism of the disciples around her, a sight that reminded her vividly of how she had been treated when she arrived late just moments ago. The stark contrast in how Bai Luoyan treated me versus how she treated Gu Yang. At that time, not a single soul spoke a word in my defense, and even after I collapsed, no one cared to offer a single word of concern. Suddenly, she seemed to understand why I had always harbored such dislike for Gu Yang. Even though Gu Yang had done nothing wrong, and the fault did not lie with him, she knew she shouldn't blame him. She found herself utterly unable to act as she had in the past, unable to comfort him without a second thought. My apologies. She offered a dry, stiff apology, pushed past those blocking her path, and departed in haste, leaving the disciples behind to stare at one another in bewilderment. Watching her retreating figure, Gu Yang lowered his eyes. Medicine Peak, the pharmacy, meridians severed throughout the body, spiritual roots destroyed. After thoroughly examining my physical state, Shenzahong withdrew her hand. She rose to face Bai Luoyan, her expression difficult to describe. So you truly have your answer, Bai Luoyan murmured, her composure shaken. In the past, she could watch Mount Tai collapse before her eyes without a flicker of emotion, yet now her expression bore a hint of confusion and panic. I merely channeled a sliver of spiritual energy into him, she thought. How could this happen? As she spoke, she seemed to recall something suddenly. Her voice trailed off into silence. She went quiet, her hands hanging at her sides, her fingertips clenching until they turned deathly pale. It appeared that senior sister had remembered. He had lost his golden core and his internal spiritual energy had dissipated entirely. Seeing her demeanor, Shen Zixing knew she had realized the truth. She curled her lips, her expression a mix of mockery and amusement as she remarked, in a state devoid of spiritual energy to guide it, and while he is unconscious, to suddenly force such potent spiritual energy into him. Would that not shatter his meridians and cripple his spiritual roots? Even if his golden core were still intact, even if he were still at the golden core stage, he could not withstand the unrefined spiritual energy of a grandmaster on the verge of ascension like yourself. Normally, when a cultivator is injured, one should only channel their own energy gently into the other's meridians to guide their chaotic flow. Standard practice dictates that when one must transmit spiritual energy, it should only be done at a level the recipient's meridians can endure, rather than doing what Bai Luoyan did, saying nothing at all, and directly flooding him with an endless torrent of energy. For a moment, Shen Zixing even wondered if Bai Luoyan despised her disciple so deeply that she had done this intentionally. I had assumed that every cultivator learned such basic common sense when they first began their journey. Seeing Bai Luoyan's complexion pale at her words, her expression growing tense, Shen Zixing felt a strange sense of satisfaction rising within her. Though she did not know the origin of this emotion, she did not suppress the curve of her lips. With a half-smile, she continued, noting how she could be so ruthless even toward one who favored her. Senior sister, you are truly cold-hearted. It is no wonder you are renowned as the most unfeeling person in the cultivation world. I truly pity him. Shen Zixing seemed oblivious to Bai Luoyan, whose expression was growing increasingly rigid and strained. However, after receiving this lesson, I suppose he will not dare to do it again, will he? He won't dare to feign suffering or put on a tragic display just to capture my attention again. That's right, just to get my attention. Back when I first arrived at the Wanfa sect, he was constantly clinging to you and acting as if he treated you well. Compared to what I have done, even the act of expressing affection for Bai Luoyan only occurred when she drove me away. I had clearly resolved that in this lifetime I would never truly harbor feelings for her. Later, she inadvertently overheard me when I was alone, muttering to myself that if it weren't for a certain something, I would have long since abandoned this pursuit. That certain something was naturally Bai Luoyan. Although I never once uttered a word of dislike toward her, from that moment on, she realized that my ostentatious displays of kindness toward Bai Luoyan were merely to provoke a reaction from her. It was only that my calculations had gone astray. Regardless of what I did, she would not show even the slightest trace of emotion. Congratulations, senior sister. Thinking this, she smiled at Bai Luoyan, her intent ambiguous as she spoke with what sounded like a blessing. After this incident of being crippled, you can finally succeed in freeing yourself. Before she could finish her sentence, a surge of spiritual energy manifested without mercy, striking out like a palm. Shen Ziheng barely managed to dodge, while the folding screen beside him suffered the collateral damage, shattered beyond recognition. Senior sister, what are you doing? Looking at the destroyed screen, Shen Ziheng's expression shifted, and he looked up at Bai Luoyan in anger. Only then did she notice that Bai Luoyan's complexion had turned unimaginably grim. Since when did my affairs with him become any of your concern to speak upon? Bai Luoyan's voice was so cold it made one tremble. Whether he dares or does not dare, whether I free myself from him or not, what does that have to do with you? From now on, keep your hands out of my business. This warning, heavy with intense emotion, left Shen Ziheng stunned. Although she and the senior sister were never particularly close, they had never before been at such daggers drawn. Previously, she would have merely cast a cold, indifferent glance. But this time, as Shen Ziheng looked at Bai Luoyan, his expression gradually became peculiar. Stop spouting nonsense and save the person. Bai Luoyan cast a glance at her, ignoring the probing gaze that unsettled her heart, and issued a cold command. She herself did not understand what had come over her. Ever since reaching the half-step ascension realm, she had never been easily swayed by emotion. The rare instances that had occurred were always because of me, which had led her to hold a profound dislike for this disciple. Yet he was incorrigible, seizing every opportunity to loom before her. No matter how cold her demeanor, this time it was even worse. It not only caused her to feel a flicker of guilt, but when she heard Shen Ziheng suggest that I wished to abandon her, a sudden, inexplicable rage flared in her heart, ultimately driving her to lash out directly. Reflecting on these thoughts, the expression on her face became all the more unsightly. Addressing the matter at hand, Shen Zixing finally regained her composure. She cast a glance toward the figure on the bed, her expression turning somewhat melancholic. To what extent should he be saved? You know full well, save him to the best of your ability. Bai Luoyan truly had no desire to hear any more of her nonsense. She interrupted her directly, urging her to do her utmost. Whatever rare medicinal herbs are required, feel free to come to me and collect them. It is my will that he survives and thrives. Having said this, as if unwilling to linger, she turned to leave. Yet just before departing, she paused, and only after a long silence did she speak again. Once he awakens, tell him that the promise I made to enter into a Taoist partnership with him will be honored soon. Let the grand ceremony for our bonding be set for 1 month from now. Mushu had only just managed to catch up. Having heard these very words, she stood frozen in place, stunned. Shen Zixing discovered that in the few days since I had taken up residence at the Medicine Peak, the entire mountain had become somewhat abnormal. At first, no disciples were willing to attend to me. Even those from the pharmacy would avoid entering unless absolutely necessary, requiring her direct orders every time. But after a few days, disciples began to go of their own accord without any instruction from her. Gradually, the number of those wanting to go grew, and even those who were not assigned to do so would frequently find excuses to visit me, or take detours just to catch a glimpse from afar. This piqued Shen Zixing's curiosity, and finding herself with some free time today, she decided to get to the bottom of it. Didn't you say you wanted to eat the pastries from the shop at the foot of the mountain earlier? I have brought them all for you. Why have you stopped after eating only a bite or two? How can you carry on like this? With your body in its current state, if you do not eat, do you even wish to recover? Oh my, senior brother does not wish to eat. Stop pressuring him. Senior sister, is it perhaps not to your taste? What would you like to eat then? I will go and prepare it for you. Shen Zixing had just reached the entrance of the pharmacy when she heard these remarks. She raised an eyebrow and looked inside, only to see me surrounded by the very disciples who had previously shunned me, relentlessly fawning over me. My complexion was weary, and I seemed to have no interest in anything. Perhaps it was because I had only just recovered from a severe illness. A pale sickly hue still lingered on my face, yet there was no sign of desolation. Not only was there no desolation, conversely, due to my weakened constitution, I lacked the strength to concern myself with anyone or engage in conflict. My entire being had lost its usual sharp edge, lending an air of fragile beauty to my handsome features. Furthermore, I appeared as if I had suffered some great blow. My expression was listless, indifferent to everything around me, a demeanor that was inexplicably stirring to those who beheld it. This appearance was truly prone to drawing involuntary attention from others. Shen Zixing finally understood the source of the disciples' recent changes in behavior, though it was somewhat of an eyesore, particularly the scene where I was surrounded by everyone. Specifically, the sight of me being surrounded by people offering their solicitous care, each one vying for a moment of my attention, like a rare piece of jade about to be discovered by the world, created an uncomfortable sensation, as if I no longer belonged to just one person. Though in her eyes I did not count as a precious gem, merely a common stone, I was promptly banished back to the Medicine Peak once again. Only this time it was met with the reluctance of many disciples. I was finally liberated. After departing the Medicine Peak, I let out a long breath, for if I had continued to remain there, continuing to be coddled by the brothers and sisters of the Medicine Peak, day by day not only would I fail to die, but I would be far too well nourished. Thinking of this, I heaved a sigh, then knit my brows tightly together. It was abnormal, too abnormal. There were discrepancies manifesting everywhere. First, there was Mu Shuo, who previously cared nothing for me, yet repeatedly thwarted my attempts to die and escape this predicament. Then came these past few days at the Medicine Peak. Regardless of how listless my demeanor was, the senior sister and the brothers of the Medicine Peak remained unusually attentive, which felt wrong no matter how one looked at it. It felt as if I were under a curse, where every event unfolded in direct opposition to my intentions. I intended to question the system again, but as I opened my mouth, I remembered, 5 days ago, after I awoke and discovered I had survived death yet again, I had subjected the system to such a relentless ordeal that it had been frightened into hiding. It had not appeared for several days, leaving me to sigh helplessly once more. At this very moment, a soft who has dared to disturb my senior brother's peace, causing my senior brother to sigh to such an extent. I was startled and looked up, catching sight of several familiar figures, the very people everyone holds in such high regard. The junior disciple of the Wanfa sect, Gu Yang, and his band of self-appointed protectors were glaring at me with open hostility. Beside them stood Mu Sui, who pressed her lips together and remained silent upon seeing me. With an expression of wanting to speak yet holding back, she surveyed the group gathered before me. My gaze swept across them, and suddenly I smiled. My eyes glinted with newfound fervor. The perfect opportunity to court my own demise had arrived. These people have always been fiercely protective of Gu Yang, and Gu Yang is Mu Shui's ultimate boundary. If I were to display any intention of harming Gu Yang right now, I considered that despite the mystery of why, Mu Zhou, who had already changed her attitude toward me, would surely find her patience exhausted and take action against me. This time, my death would be certain. Senior brother, why are you looking at me like that? Unable to withstand the intensity of my gaze, Gu Yang instinctively defaulted to his usual behavior, pretending not to notice while easily drawing near. He eventually stopped 2 paces away and asked timidly. I smiled languidly and replied, because I see that you are beautiful. While Gu Yang stood there in a daze, I cast a calm glance at the fellow disciples behind him, who clearly had not expected me to speak so brazenly. Those who had been wary since the moment they saw me now wore expressions of pure shock. Seeing this, I chuckled, watching them with the playfulness of a cat toying with a mouse. I spoke to Gu Yang with hidden meaning. Junior brother, your recovery is truly remarkable. Not long ago, you were on the verge of death, yet here you are, full of vigor. Upon hearing this, the expressions of his fellow disciples shifted, their already vigilant faces turning even more guarded. Mushu, who had been struggling to find the right words, found herself even more conflicted. Watching her open her mouth several times as if wanting to offer an explanation, she clearly realized that anything she said would be misplaced. In the end, she chose to remain silent. What was once merely a speculation of mine had now been confirmed. The members of the sect have not informed him of the matter regarding the demonic pill. They are, in fact, actively concealing it. After all, given Gu Yang's simple and kind-hearted nature, if he were truly aware of the situation, his reaction upon seeing me should not be as it was. Instead, he should appear remorseful and filled with grievance. Anything less would hardly befit the description of being simple and kind-hearted. That is only to be expected. Gu Yang seemed entirely oblivious to the strange, suffocating tension permeating the air. Gu Yang seemed entirely oblivious to the strange, suffocating tension, genuinely believing that I was discussing the matter with him in earnest, even offering cheerful praise. With Uncle Shen's formidable medical prowess and Master personally retrieving spirit herbs for me, how could my injuries possibly fail to heal? It is only a pity that Master had to endure such hardship on my behalf. I heard the senior brothers say that in order to find those spirit herbs for me, Master had to suffer great indignity. As soon as these words were spoken, everyone present, save for Gu Yang and myself, saw their expressions shift dramatically. The hearts of the senior and junior brothers rose to their very throats, all of them staring at me with unmistakable anxiety and apprehension. They feared that if I heard this, I might lose my temper and reveal the truth, causing their junior brother Gu Yang to fall into grief and guilt, yet they dared not interrupt too abruptly. Capturing Gu Yang's attention, I watched their restless, uneasy behavior and found it quite amusing, disregarding the implications of Gu Yang's words entirely. After all, what I enjoy most is watching these people grow frantic while being unable to do anything against me, forced to wait for my whim to decide their fate. I simply wonder what indignity Master had to suffer. Gu Yang, still unaware of the volatile atmosphere, continued to mutter to me, his tone thick with dissatisfaction and suspicion. I asked the senior brothers, but they refused to tell me. Senior brother, do you know what indignity Master suffered in order to obtain those spirit herbs? Enough. I have not even reacted yet. Mu Shui, who had remained silent until now, could no longer endure it. With a single sentence, she cut Gu Yang off. Say no more. Everyone present was frozen by her sharp cry, turning their gazes toward her in astonishment. Mu Shua, however, did not spare them a single glance, nor did she offer an explanation. Amidst their bewildered stares, she declared, "Let us leave." Without another word, she took hold of me, intent on departing. This place and the people within it filled her with a sense of immense pressure. Whether it was the way the senior and junior brothers guarded themselves against me with such vigilance, or the thoughtless, cutting remarks uttered by Gu Yang, all of it struck her as profoundly grating. It was clearly I who had yielded my golden core so that Gu Yang could remain safe and sound. Yet these people showed no gratitude. And while it was one thing to conceal the truth to spare Gu Yang from guilt, why must they treat me with such hostile suspicion? To spread rumors about Master suffering indignities, it is nothing but absolute drivel. The suggestion to trade the golden core and become Tao companions was clearly put forward by Master herself. I never once requested such a union. In fact, when Master proposed the exchange of the core, I agreed without a moment's hesitation, asking for nothing in return. This notion of becoming Tao companions was merely a conclusion Master arrived at of her own accord. As a disciple who has given his heart and soul to sacrifice, how could I ever force the one I love into doing something she dislikes? Even after I had given away my very golden core, the only thing I received in return was injustice and such heartless words. Hearing those words from the person who had accepted my core, even she, as an observer, found it stifling. How much more agonizing must it have been for me, the one truly involved? Consequently, she only wished to take me away, to remove me from this place where the pressure was enough to stop a person from breathing. What is the rush? Who would have guessed that I would break free from her grasp and step back, my expression etched with complete indifference? Seeing my apparent detachment, Mushu assumed I was merely putting on a brave front to mask the profound sorrow in my heart. She believed I was simply waiting for a moment of solitude to lick my wounds, and her heart ached with pity, though she found herself unable to speak another word. I could not fathom her thoughts. I only presumed she was afraid I might reveal something I shouldn't, fearing that Gu Yang would discover the truth, which is why she was so eager to pull me away. But that would not do. If I were to leave now, how could I fulfill my wish to die? If junior brother Gu Yang truly wishes to know, I cannot let Mu Shui ruin my plans. I looked toward Gu Yang, then glanced at the other senior and junior brothers, deliberately asking with a malicious intent, "Do you wish to know what grievances Master suffered in her search for medicinal herbs? Do you wish to know the true nature of the spiritual herb that saved your life? And would you like to know why, while you have recovered, I, who was perfectly healthy, suddenly collapsed in the lecture hall a few days ago? Tell me, are you not curious? Why is it that I, the person standing before you, no longer possess even a single strand of spiritual energy? I know all of these things, and if you wish to know, I am more than willing to tell you." The fellow disciples kept a vigilant watch, and as I continued to speak, a look of confusion and doubt began to manifest on junior brother Gu Yang's face. Filled with a mixture of indignation and alarm, he could finally restrain himself no longer and shouted, cutting me off. One of the junior brothers drew his sword and pointed it directly at me, threatening, "Shut your mouth. If you dare utter another word, do not blame me for disregarding our ties as fellow disciples and taking action against you. It is here. It is finally here." Watching the keen blade leveled at me, the very blood in my veins began to surge with excitement. That which I have long awaited is finally coming to pass, yet before I could rejoice for even a few seconds, a figure suddenly stepped in front of me. I was taken aback and looked up. It was Mu Shui. You tell me, who did you say you wanted to take action against? At that moment, Mushua's expression was cold and stern, her icy gaze locked onto the inner disciple before her, so intense. Ashiji's aura in the sect right now, impeccable. Her voice oozed pressure, pointing her sword at her fellow disciples, threatening to get nasty. Now that's how an inner sect disciple acts. On Fa sect, you say? Even though she didn't want Guyang to know about the pill swap, didn't want Guyang to feel like he couldn't look her in the eye after the pill swap and live forever in guilt, but she also didn't want to see me get hurt. She couldn't protect me in front of Master before this time. She definitely gonna protect me, Zhou Quan, from these chumps who are way weaker than her. Dashiji, the disciples were shook by her actions, faces plastered with disbelief. Clearly they never expected Mushue to stand in front of me to defend me, let alone scold them for my sake. Put your sword down. Mushue didn't budge, still coldly staring straight at the intersect junior brother in front of her. The Shidi was stared at with such oppressive eyes, his heart began to retreat, and the arm holding the sword began to falter. Alarms blaring in his head mixed with unbearable pain. This good opportunity has been ruined. Ushue, does this guy have beef with me or what? Why are you meddling in other people's business? Afraid that the disciple would really put down his sword, losing his will to fight, I hurriedly pushed Mushu away, once again facing the tip of the sword, rudely said to Mushue, my business is none of your concern. Step aside. After saying that, I didn't bother paying attention to her, so I didn't see the look of disappointment on Mushue's face after being pushed away. I looked at that disciple, deliberately scrutinizing him from top to bottom, inwardly extremely satisfied but outwardly extremely contemptuous and arrogant. You just said you wanted to make a move on me? My tone was extremely dismissive. Laughing coldly, I see the sword in your hand. I'm afraid you can't even get close to me. And you want to stand up for Guyang? Go to sleep, anything is possible in your dreams. That intersect junior brother was already annoyed. Dashiji, whom he respected, was not respected, and he himself was ridiculed, and his anger rose to his head, and his previous intention to retreat vanished without a trace. The battle spirit is reignited. Our boy's got a grip on that sword, and his aura is even more intense than before. Big Sis is watching all this. Did Guyang's careless words strike a nerve? Big Sis is watching. Is this the guy you're protecting? He glares at Mujo, all salty, saying, you're so ungrateful to her. Why are you even protecting him? Today, no matter what, even if I break the rules, I'm teaching him a lesson. With zero hesitation, he doesn't waste words, just grabs his sword and charges straight at me. Today, he's making sure I can't utter another word. My eyes light up, no dodging, no weaving, just standing my ground, eyes full of anticipation and hype. This junior brother charges, completely caught off guard by my reaction. He's shocked but also sus, thinking it's a trap. His attacks instantly become more cautious. Just as the sword tip is about to pierce my heart, a blade flashes from the side, knocking his sword away, perfectly neutralizing the attack. The inner disciple is deflected, stumbling back several steps, looking bewildered and pissed. Sista, he says, dripping with disappointment, who gave you permission to interfere? Musho offers no explanation, just stands firmly in front of me and says sternly. The inner disciple instantly grips his sword tighter, reluctantly looking at Muajua, then angrily back at me. Seeing I'm still standing there, not even trying to dodge, looking like I'm expecting this. It clicks, he realizes no wonder he didn't bother dodging, he knew you'd step in. That thought just fuels his rage even more. If Big Sis is dead set on protecting him, fine, no more small talk. Then I'll just have to disrespect you. Let's see if you can actually protect him. And he charges again. Ushue's face darkens. You're not allowed to hurt him. She blocks another attack for me. And instantly, they're locked in a brawl. Fifth bro, Big Sis, their moves are too fast and they're both heated up. Others want to mediate, but they don't even have a chance. They can only panic and shout a few times. Guyang looks like he got scared stiff, rooted to the spot. Fifth bro is clearly no match for Mushue. After a few exchanges, it's obvious he's on the losing side and will fall soon. Ush isn't holding back, and the other senior brothers watching can't help but feel a bit resentful. Usually Mushue, the senior sister of Wan Fazong, is super friendly to them and they respect her a lot. But now the Shiji they respected was treating them like this because of me. It's all my fault. Thinking that, they all looked at me, their eyes filled with anger and a hint of malice. At this moment, I was also watching the two people fighting. Seeing that the fifth Shidi everyone mentioned was completely no match for Mushua, I frowned. My heart was filled with frustration because my plan was ruined by Mushu again. Suddenly, I sensed that the intersect Shishyong Didi, who were also watching the fight, were all looking at me, their eyes carrying ill intentions. I was momentarily puzzled, but Lu Chuan's gaze instantly understood something. The frustration in my heart immediately vanished. Compared to the intersect fifth Shidi from before, these people were clearly much more sensible, not saying a word, and very tacitly drew their swords and rushed towards me one after another. Seeing this scene, I smiled with satisfaction. Ushue, who was dealing with the intersect fifth Shidi, considered it. Seeing that the lesson was almost enough, was planning to knock him away, and while turning around, her eyes caught sight of the situation here. Her heart skipped a beat, and without thinking much, she resolved her opponent with one move and quickly rushed over. In this critical moment, she saved me once again. The Shixiong Didi didn't stop. If one move didn't work, they changed to another. If it were normal, these people would not be Mushue's opponents at all. But at this moment, in addition to dealing with these people, Mushu also had to guard against them breaking through the defense line and harming me, so she couldn't fully display her strength. For a time, the two sides were locked in a stalemate. Apart from me and Gao Yang, everyone else was in a chaotic battle. If my Jin Dan was still there, and I hadn't lost all my spiritual power, I would definitely have a good talk with Mu Shui right now. Looking at the two sides in a constant struggle, I frowned. These people are clearly not Mu Shui's opponents. If it continues like this, they will only be defeated, and then there will be no one to kill me. No way, I absolutely can't miss this good opportunity. If the mistake lies with Mu Shui, then let her make up for it herself. As the plan formed in my mind, I began to act. Turning to face Gu Yang, who was tense because of the struggle of the others. Long Shidi, hearing someone call him, Gu Yang finally snapped out of the chaotic scene. He looked towards me, and seeing that it was me, he couldn't just watch my beloved bros throw hands like this, so she's low-key panicking, begging for help. Straight up pleading with the villain like they're her personal savior. Sirs, they're fighting. I hit him with a gesture and deadass say, let them duke it out, no need to babysit. Sis just casually yanks out her hairpin, hair cascades down like a Pantene commercial. She's all touchy-feely with the hairpin, then bam, looks at Gu Yang with a smile that could launch 1,000 ships. For a hot sec, Gu Yang forgot how to breathe. Looks like it's just you and me with nothing to do. Check it, Shiji, seems like we're the only ones left chilling. I chime in again. My voice is icy and nonchalant like a lazy cat. Finally, some peace and quiet, to bug it. Gu Yang stutters, probably thinking some wild stuff. Blood rushes to his head, his brain's overheating. Ears are turning red, faces all over the place, shy, scared, annoyed. What a roller coaster. Like his face is a masterpiece of mixed signals. I casually glance at this clown. Kinda weirded out by his face, but whatever. Ain't gonna dig too deep, I just keep going. Didn't you want to know what kind of humiliation Shizun had to endure to get you that elixir? I was gonna spill the tea earlier but kept getting interrupted. Now that we're alone, let's get into it. Oh, so that's what she's talking about. Gu Yang is shook and his face is burning with shame. This dude can't even make eye contact. He awkwardly looks away and mumbles. Turns out it wasn't some elixir that healed me at all. I just casually drop a bombshell. Gu Yang tilts his head like a confused puppy. It was my Jinden, I drop another nuke. You were messed up bad, your Jinden was almost corrupted by demonic ki. Only my Jindan, same cultivation technique, same extreme yin body could save you. That day, Shizun came to me begging me to trade my Jindan to save your life. I agreed on one condition, we become Dao partners. After I drop that truth bomb, Gu Yang is straight up paralyzed. Homeboy's face is pale, staring blankly at me. Dude's about to lose it, can't keep his composure. Especially thinking about that smug look he had earlier, and the things he said to my face. Now those words hit him like a face-slapping technique, and he struggled to speak, only managing to choke out. I didn't know, he just feels the burn, man. Of course you didn't know, you absolute clown. My expression barely flickered, tone still chill, but my words came out sharper than a flying sword. You're the precious treasure the whole sect protects. Why would they ever let you deal with this kind of heat? Wu Yang's face just keeps getting paler and paler, he's about to faint. Qinjet, that's enough. Everyone fighting on the side stopped to check out the drama. Ushua's face is kind of frozen, but everyone else is looking at me with straight-up fury in their eyes. The fifth Shikshong is straight-up raring with rage. Enough, I say, casually glancing over. I'm actually loving this whole everyone Vesmi vibe right now, but I force a sarcastic chuckle and ask, what's enough? It's not even close to enough. Are you scared that if he finds out, his worldview will shatter? The more you try to hide it, the more I want to spill the beans. You're a seriously twisted dude. That gem came from another Shishiong. So what if you're a Jindan expert now? It's still something you owe him. If you hadn't messed with Mojin, would Gu Yangshidi have gotten hurt? Handing over your Jindan for Gu Yangshidi was the least you could do. Instead, you used it to blackmail Luoyan Xianzun, forcing her to become your Dao companion. And you're still not satisfied? You're coming after Nshidi? How can anyone be such a POS? That fiery speech got the other Shikshongs looking all righteous and pissed. Only Mu Shui and Gu Yang, who were actually there when he got hurt, are looking stunned. Especially Gu Yang, how could he not be confused? What did my actions have to do with him being injured? They were just coming back from a mission when they bumped into Mojin and got into a fight. He lost and got seriously hurt. He opens his mouth to defend me, but I cut him off. So I'm only evil now. Where have you been under a rock? Our boy's tone is straight up provocative, seemingly unbothered by being misunderstood. Can you believe I just said that? This clown almost coughed up blood from anger, and I couldn't care less. I glance over at Gu Yang again, playing with the needle in front of his face, speaking slowly. You all saw it, right? I gave him the Jindan, but got absolutely nothing good in return. Not even counting the debt from when old man swapped the Dan and only stayed by your side. Just look at now, his simps want me dead. And that seriously makes me unhappy. Like, really unhappy. So I regret it now and I want my Jindan back. As I say that, my hand moves, gripping the needle tightly. I'm taking back what's mine. Then I plunge the needle towards Gu Yang's dantian. Ushue likes ruining my perfectly good self-destruct plan, right? Seeing me about to harm Gu Yang, she's probably regretting everything now, huh? I doubt Mushui will stop others from taking my life in this situation. Qin, stop. My movements were too fast. Everyone was shocked by my sudden attack. By the time they reacted, their faces had gone pale. They all rushed towards me, including Mu Shui, because she knows I have no spiritual power. With my weak body barely recovered, I can't harm Gu Yang, who has a golden core protecting him. Even if Gu Yang resists a little, I could be seriously injured. She screamed inwardly, wanting to stop, but her move, launched in the heat of the moment, was with all her strength. By the time she realized it, it was too late. The tip of her sword was about to hit my back. The tip of her sword was about to hit my back. Even though she lessened the force, the momentum pushed her forward. She couldn't do anything anymore. Like a slow-motion movie, she could only watch her sword and the others pierce my body at the same time. But this is where things get interesting. An unknown barrier appeared, also blocked the needle stabbing towards Gu Yang. The sharp weapon collided with the barrier, emitting a crisp sound. This sound entered Mushue's ears like the sound of heaven. I was mentally prepared to die, but hearing the sound and feeling the resistance on my hand, I felt totally off. I looked into the distance with a face no regrets. A familiar figure in a white Taoist robe flew over and stopped not far away. They were still looking at this side from afar, or rather looking at me, seemingly blaming me for almost harming Gu Yang. Eyes filled with surprise and anger, the expression on his face brought a gloomy feeling like a storm was coming. Why is this guy here to join the fun? I was extremely helpless and secretly pained. Even if he wanted to save Gu Yang, he didn't need to wrap me in a barrier. He could have just erected a barrier between me and Gu Yang. But it's Shen Shishu. The disciples were shocked to see the person arriving. Only Mu Shui didn't care about anything. Nor did she look at Gu Yang, who was standing there dumbfounded as if frightened. She quickly retracted her sword and ran to my side, pulling me away from Gu Yang to prevent me from doing something again, and also to prevent others from hurting me because they were worried about Gu Yang, and carefully examined me from head to toe. Chinjet Shidi, how do you feel? Are you injured? After seeing no new injuries on me, she breathed a sigh of relief, but was still not completely relieved, her voice filled with regret, remorse, and concern as she asked. I didn't even look at her. My attention was all on Shen Zihong, who was gradually approaching. Hearing the question, I just smiled insincerely and gritted my teeth, saying, with Shishu protecting me, what could possibly happen to me? Mu Shui was still regretting her instinctive move just now, so she didn't notice the abnormality in my words. Instead, she thought I was blaming her, deliberately using Shen Zihong's protection of me to mock her, and immediately became a little depressed. Seeing that I only looked at Shen Zihong, not giving her even a fraction of my attention, she couldn't help but feel a sense of loss in her heart. It's good that you're okay, she said sadly, and then took the opportunity to look at Shen Zihong, who had arrived in front of her, and greeted him. Shishu, Shen Zihong didn't pay attention to anyone until he came in front of me, and finally deigned to glance at the others before responding. His gaze stopped on Gu Yang, seeing that the other party's face was still a little pale, looking like he had been frightened, and couldn't help but frown. Shishu Guang only snapped back to reality from the horror at this moment, pitifully calling out. Looks like he's about to burst into tears, but he's forcing himself to hold back, making people feel sorry for him. Little Shidi, even the inner sect brothers couldn't help but worry. Shen Zhang paused for a moment to think, then spoke up to comfort him. It's alright, Shen Shishu thinks Qingche is being way too audacious. Seeing this, a disciple couldn't help but start complaining, his voice filled with grief and indignation. Right in front of our faces, he dared to harm little Shidi. If you hadn't arrived in time, little Shidi would be dead. Shen Shishu, please avenge little Shidi. Shen Zihong only nodded after listening, glanced at that disciple, then looked at me, his eyes unfathomable. This disciple is telling the absolute truth. Shen Zihong didn't say a word, still looking at me, and said, Qingche, you speak. They aren't lying. Without a second thought, I readily admitted it, not even offering a single defense. If you look closely, you can even see anticipation in my eyes. Of course, Shen Zihong knows what I'm looking forward to. From the day my Jindan was extracted, she just left me there to bleed out without giving a damn about the wound. She already knew that this dude didn't want to live anymore. She didn't know what she was feeling, but she could clearly sense that her expression was ugly right now. In a few days, you guys will have to go down the mountain again to train. Shen Zihong stopped looking at me and suddenly turned to look at the disciples. Suddenly turning to look at those guys. Suddenly saying something out of the blue. The disciples looked puzzled. A moment later, they saw Shen Shishu, who usually didn't care much about irrelevant people or matters, suddenly speaking sternly and coldly. Instead of preparing for the upcoming training, you're slaughtering your fellow disciples here. You guys are really something, daring to disregard the sect rules like that. I see you don't want to be Wanfazong disciples anymore. These words were truly heavy. The inner sect disciples' faces turned pale, and they all forgot their previous grudges and knelt down. Shen Shishu, we didn't have provoked us first. The inner sect disciple hurriedly explained, enough. Shen Zihong didn't want to listen to his nonsense. I don't care what happened that made you go wild and cause chaos in Yaofeng. I want some peace. Today, considering that you're making a mistake for the first time, I won't pursue it further. Go to the punishment hall to receive your punishment. Receive punishment? Hearing this, my eyes lit up. Shen Zihong glanced over with a meh look. Didn't think you'd actually let me off the hook like that. Looks like he ain't pressing charges either. Another bro sipping on that dumb juice. Guess I ain't dying today, fam. Sword was practically tickling my spine. Yeah, guess I ain't dying today. The disciples heard they're only getting punished, not kicked out of the sect. They're all secretly relieved they dodged a bullet. They def ain't gonna bring up me injuring Gu Yang, especially since I'm somehow skating on this without any punishment. Tongqing agreed and got up, not daring to delay a single second. Gu Yang, who'd been silent since calling Shen Shishu, suddenly stopped the little Shishong. The disciples stopped but didn't dare look directly at Gu Yang. They didn't have the guts to go against Shen Zihong and demand justice for him. Gu Yang then asked a question none of them expected. Why do you all say Qinjet provoked the ink remnant beast, causing my injuries? Gu Yang, after a moment of hesitation, bit her lip and asked. The disciples were stunned. Finally, one of them replied, because everyone said so. That day, Shiji carried you back to the sect covered in blood. She didn't show Qinjet any face the entire way. Some disciples even said they overheard Shiji questioning him, asking him why he was still standing there unscathed, asking why it was you who was injured and not him. From then on, we guessed Qinjet was the ringleader. Why else would Shiji say that? Hearing this, the look of shock on Gu Yang's face was beyond words. Wushua stumbled and almost fell, only to get a reminder. She recalled the situation that day. She and some fellow disciples were returning from a mission. They stumbled upon a high-level ink remnant wreaking havoc. Its cultivation was far above theirs, and they fought to save others. They stepped up to help, and everyone got hurt in the process. Only she and I were in relatively good shape. After struggling, we managed to work together to kill the ink remnant and rushed back to the sect, only to find out Gu Ying's golden core was on the verge of shattering. At that time, she was just heartbroken. He even forgot to wipe the dirt off his face. So when I walked over to her and gave her a peep brocade, she couldn't contain her emotions anymore, venting all her feelings on me, snatching the brocade and throwing it to the ground, uttering hurtful words in a fit of pique. She ignored my expression back then, but now the memory is so clear. In my memory, I was staring at the brocade she threw on the ground, my face showing undisguised hurt. Turns out, it was all because of her that I was misunderstood, that I was scolded for being vicious. The irony is she was indignant for him being misunderstood before. Because of other things, she felt angry and aggrieved, but the real culprit clearly included her. Mu Sui felt a pang in her heart. She wanted to laugh a little, twitching her lips, but found it difficult. Then she heard Gu Yang speak. It's not like that, Gu Yang said. After an initial moment of surprise, he looked at Mu Zhui with a complicated expression, then turned to me, only to see this person's face still showing a look of indifference. Even when he saw Mu Shui's unusual reaction and his hesitant expression, I showed a bit of bewilderment, as if not understanding why they were reacting this way. This reaction made it impossible for him to ignore his conscience and remain silent. Even though I wanted to hurt him just now, he pursed his lips, and in the end, he didn't say anything to me, turning to look at the inner disciples. You've all misunderstood, although I don't know why Shiji said that at the time. Meeting Mo Jin was really just a coincidence. This has nothing to do with Qin Che Shishiong. I wasn't injured by him either. He even took a blow for me back then. The Shixing and Shiji who were present at the time all saw it. If you don't believe me, you can go ask them. The inner disciples were all shocked and looked at me with profound eyes. After regaining their senses, they all looked at each other blankly, involuntarily glancing towards me, but their eyes lacked their previous aggression, replaced by a hint of guilt. Yet asking them to apologize or say anything to me, they just couldn't spit it out. Shiji, why don't you say something? Gu Yang, waiting for them to act, assumed they still didn't believe him, wanting to drag Mushu into explaining to everyone. The misunderstanding started with you. You have to explain the situation that day, and why you said those things, otherwise, senior brother Qin Che will suffer unfairly. Mushua's face turned even paler at Gu Yang's words, the regret and remorse in her eyes deepening. All right, Gu Yang. Shen Zihong, ever so astute, nearly saw Mushua's abnormality at a glance. Connecting the dots of what happened before and after, immediately understanding that she was regretting it, fearing Gu Yang would continue pressing her and she'd instantly lose control, so he spoke up to stop him, then looked towards the others. Aren't you going to accept your punishment? The disciples immediately knew that Uncle Shen was disgusted with them, understanding his meaning, and hurriedly took their leave. Disciples take their leave and will send Gu Yang back before receiving punishment. Shen Zihong said again, even though Gu Yang was very unwilling. He was finally dragged away, leaving only Qin Che at the scene, Shen Zihong and Mu Shui. Don't forget, you should go accept your punishment too. After everyone left, Shen Zihong mocked with deep meaning, glancing at Mu Shui, who was in a daze, leaving a sentence, then brought me, who had been in a daze this whole time, because I heard that others were about to leave for training. Shishu, where are you taking me? Looking at the familiar path leading to the medicine peak ahead, I finally snapped out of thinking about why I didn't die and how much opportunity there was to die in training. I asked strangely, but Shen Zihong didn't answer, still silently taking me on his sword with a gloomy expression. Clearly her bad mood hadn't dissipated and it seemed she wanted to settle accounts later. I frowned, looking at the increasingly close medicine peak barrier with a bad premonition in my heart. I ain't trying to stay in Yaofeng anymore. Wait, Shishu really wants to send me back to Yaofeng? Bro, is Shishu trying to imply I left something behind at Yaofeng, so she's giving me a VIP trip back? Still no response. Savage. I'll take that as a yes, even though I can't remember for the life of me if I even left anything at Yaofeng. Still being polite, actually, Shishu didn't need to personally make the trip. Just send someone to drop it off, you know? Isn't this trip kinda a hassle? Shishu just dropped me off up ahead. Just tell me where the thing is, and I'll grab it myself. Don't want to trouble you. Seems like my voice is starting to get on her nerves. Shenzahong finally snaps and suddenly speeds up, giving me whiplash. Next thing I know, we're in front of Yao Feng's main hall, and Shenzahong slams me against the wall, trapping me between her and the brick, gripping my chin. You really want to die, don't you? Shenzahong forces me to look her in the eye. It's a question, but her tone is dead certain. I'm still processing what's happening, a little confused about what she's getting at, but this chick sounds like she's already made up her mind, so I skip the excuses and just hit her with it. How'd you know? Called it. Shenzahong's face instantly drops to sub-zero temps, replaying that scene in her head. If she hadn't shown up when she did, I'd be pushing up daisies right now. Her hand, which was gripping my chin, suddenly tightens, but seeing me wince, she loosens her grip, realizing her slip